the suspension of natural laws, I'd point out that there's probably not a serious theistic or Christian theologian which would define miracles as the suspension or violation of physical laws. Whatever Einstein may have said, the laws that we observe in nature are sort of like the grammar, the regular activities of the material objects that we see. They're formal descriptions, but they're not overarching laws that control in some way. And you have to finally get back to the metaphysical question of what the fundamental reality is. If theism is the answer to fundamental reality, if God is the ultimate reality, then the laws are simply a reflection of what the natural world does regularly. But just because, for instance, I drop a pin or throw a pin in the air and then catch it, right? Have I violated the law of gravity because I stopped it from dropping to the ground?
Oh, come on.
No, of course not. Why not? Why not? Why not? It's a serious question. Why? Because the laws of physics that we talk about are generalizations. They're sort of, if everything stays the same. They don't violate agent causation in the human case, and they certainly would not violate the freedom of the God who called the universe into existence to act freely in his universe. The image of God is a blind watchmaker that set things up and should most appropriately have left it to wind down on its own, is a deistic metaphor. The theistic metaphor would see God in the material universe as like a gardener who creates his garden and then chooses to tend it. Now, it's of course a separate question of whether we can detect this or whether God normally acts in the material world in some way that it's undetectable. But there's nothing incoherent or contradictory or unscientific about the basic theistic view, once you understand what it means to speak of a physical law.
I have a sense that Christopher has a response.
Well, if I may, it would take the form of a question, and I'll tell you why, because I know it's Ben and Michael's province to ask questions, and you can say that it's not mine if you wish, but
you can.
I think everybody here knows now, must have guessed roughly what I think about religion. But I don't know what you think about it.
Okay,
For example, I don't, and this happens to me all the time. I sometimes say to Christians, so you say you're a Baptist? Yes. So you believe in Calvin and predestination? I didn't say that. I thought you said you were a Baptist. No, not exactly. No. I want to know from you. Do you believe that Jesus Christ was born of a virgin?
Yes.
Do you believe he was resurrected from the dead?
Yes.
Do you believe that the Prophet Muhammad took a night journey to Jerusalem on a horse?
I don't know.
You don't know? Right. You're open-minded on that?
I just don't know.
Do you think that a God made a covenant with just one people, the Jews, at Mount Sinai?
I think he made a covenant with the Jews specifically, as it says in the text, to bless all the peoples of the earth. Yes.
I rest my case. I rest my case.
Right. I am an admitted Christian.
I rest my case. At least, ladies and gentlemen, this is much more honest than I generally get. Most people say, you ask a Catholic, do they believe in the virgin birth? They say, first they show they don't know the difference between the virgin birth and the Immaculate Conception. Second, they say you don't really have to. And so this is an honest guy who's just made it very plain to you. Science has nothing to do with his beliefs whatever.
Okay, can I...
Nothing at all. That's to his credit.
He hasn't done that at all, but to be honest, that's okay. Chris, why are some...
Christopher, please, I promise my mother.
Okay.
Also, it's my name.
If it's so incredibly clear to you that the religion is a hoax and a fraud, why are so many people in America deeply religious? Are they just stupider than you?
Well... Again, I'll take your question in reverse order, if I may. Yes, I think I am smarter than most people in the United States. And polls find that most people agree with that proposition. And only stupid people answer opinion poll questions. Second, I actually have not said that religion is a hoax or a fraud. There are fraudulent elements to it, as there has always been, the sale of indulgences, the promise of the miracle cures and so forth, the offer of false consolation. But I describe it in my book, God is Not Great, available at fine bookstores everywhere.
Nice yellow
and I bring the work of great, I bring the work of great philosophers and scientists in my more recent anthology, the Portable Atheist, the anthology of writings of unbelief, to bear, to say that no, it is the oldest argument that our species takes part in. And it's the reason why I'm fascinated by it, interested in it, willing to conduct it never refused a challenge to do so. Religion was our first try at cognition. It was our first try at epistemology. It was our first try at philosophy. It was in some ways our first try at mathematics. It's what we came up with because we are pattern-seeking and ambitious and freedom-seeking mammals when we didn't know we lived on a round or spherical planet. We didn't know that we were in circulation around other heavenly bodies. We didn't know about gravity. We didn't know there were microorganisms stronger than ourselves that explained a lot. We didn't know why the heavens darkened and rained or hailed. We didn't know why there were earthquakes or floods. It was the first tremulous attempt to make sense. And in the work of Aquinas and Augustine and elsewhere, we see the first glimmerings of our attempts at philosophy. And in the Cranmer Prayer Book and the King James version of the Bible that happen to be my favorites, and the English hymnal, we also have the beginnings of a literature. The first time everyone who could read had all read one book and had a common discourse. So it's, for me, a very, very important and honourable, and at its best even a noble subject. But of course it is man-made and a delusion. And it is used by wicked people to exploit the credulousness of innocent people to create not an eternal life or a life of freedom in another world, but a real, actual, material, secular dictatorship now claimed by people who have the arrogance to say that they themselves are acting in the name of God. And that's why it has to be opposed.
Richards, I'll let you respond to that, and then I have a question for you.
Okay, my response, I want to make clear that this actual subject of the debate is the question of atheism versus theism and not the question of any specific religion. Obviously, theism manifests itself in some particular form, in Islam or Christianity or Judaism, but that is in fact a separate subject, and so I prefer to restrict my comments to the subject of the debate itself.
Is that the wrong way around? I'm sorry, because that's why I mentioned all religions to you instead of just one.
Right, and I do not think, and I think we probably agree on this point, that the simple prevalence of a particular religion in a society is any particular mark for its truth or falsehood. There are perhaps, a billion Buddhists in Asia, over perhaps a billion Muslims around the world, and over a billion Christians. So I don't think simply the numbers answer finally the question of the truth of one or the other. And I think that the reasons and the basis on which we decide a more philosophical question, such as atheism or theism, are separate. This has always been the case in the Christian tradition, that the natural world, as Paul says in the book of Romans, he says, from the foundation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen from the things that have been made. That is, that the existence of a creator God is the sort of thing that you can discern if you look at the natural world around you. That doesn't mean that every question we ask as human beings, or everything, for instance, that a Christian would believe about God, is discernible from the natural world. But I do think there is enough discernible from the public evidence that is available, from the direct introspection to which we all have access, and the best knowledge we have from the natural world, to conclude that there is something like a God-seeking religion. I do not think that's the basis on which we establish the more specific claims of the religions.
This must be the same St. Paul who rests everything on what he calls the evidence of things not seen. Must it not? You see, this happens all the time. When you talk with the religious or those who believe these books are more than man-made texts. St. Paul says the evidence of things not seen. It may be the most beautiful of his letters. It insists on that. Jesus says, I come not to bring peace but a sword. Half the people you meet say they love Jesus because he preaches non-violence. In the Old Testament, there's no mention of hell. There's no punishment of the dead. You may die a horrible death of ethnic cleansing ordered by God, and massacre even of your children, and confiscation of all your possessions, mandated by God. But he's done with you when the grave closes over you. There's no punishment of the dead. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild, proposed by the New Testament types as a less forbidding figure than the Old Testament. God says, depart from me, if you don't agree, into everlasting fire. So the filthy concept of hell that's been used to terrorize children and lie to people by cynical priests and rabbis and imams for years, less so the rabbis, comes from Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Which book are these people quoting from? Which bit of it? Why do they think it isn't man-made when it so self-evidently is? We don't have any supernatural authority, ladies and gentlemen, in literary criticism. We're left alone with our day, and the time is short, and history to the defeated may say, alas, but cannot help or pardon, and the reference upward to the supernatural authority is an abdication